Welcome to Mental Makeover Radio, your go-to destination for meaningful conversations about mental health. I'm your host and your trusted therapist bestie, Cecilia Manella. Join us as we explore the complexities and messiness of human experience by addressing your questions and concerns. I'm here to provide a straightforward and practical therapy advice. So grab your favorite beverage, whether it's tea, coffee, or whatever tickles your taste buds, and get ready to embark on a mental makeover. Welcome to Mental Makeover Radio. I'm your host, Cecilia Manella, and I am super glad that you're here. This week, we're going to dive into a question around self care. Listen, this is a topic that is talked about quite a bit. I think that we use the term very loosely, but we don't really have a strong understanding of what self care actually is. So, we're going to dive into all the things. We're going to talk about brain functioning and what self care actually is and what it's not. And I hope that you walk away with this episode with a clear idea of what you can do to increase self care in your life and how to allocate more time towards that. So, what is self care actually? We talk about it a lot. There's hashtag self care all over the place, but we don't really have a strong understanding of what it means. But also, what's attached to that is we don't know why we actually need it. We kind of just throw this term around. So, if I were to ask you to define self care, how would you define it? Like, really think about it. If you had to write your dictionary description for self care, what would you describe it as? I would guess that you, like many people, would have a hard time describing it or defining it, but you could tell me a bunch of about all the things you can do for self-care. So maybe some of the actions that actually fall into it, but you actually can't really give me a clear definition. Now, we've all been influenced through media to list all the things that we do for self-care. From bubble baths to a glass of wine to hanging out with friends or climbing mountains or shopping or all the things. There's all these activities that we couch under hashtag self care. But is it really self care? Really ask yourself, is it actually really self care? So, my definition of self care is an intentional practice that aims to remove distractions so that you can remind yourself of the basic human needs. So, connecting to self without distractions and reminding yourself to do what humans actually need to do, getting back to being human beings and not necessarily human doings. Often, self care can be a long list of activities that just becomes a to do list or a task list. And then we check them off and we're supposed to, in quotation marks, feel better about ourselves and our life. But really, does it have that effect? Does it actually resonate with you? Is it intentional? Do you feel it? And for my conversations with people, most people say no. The dictionary defines self care as a practice of taking an active role in protecting one's well being and happiness, in particular during times of stress. So, what to take out of this is that self care is an active and intentional practice with a focus on protecting one's well being as a way to prevent long term impacts of stress, which is an amazing definition. And I hope that even just knowing that definition, it might shift right now in this moment as you're listening to this, shift your perspective a little bit, or makes you start to question what you've been labeling as self care and really asking yourself if it actually is self care. So, again, self care is an active and intentional practice with a focus on protecting one's well being as a way to prevent long term impacts of stress. So, stress is a really big topic. And this is really why self care is really important, is because we are the most stressed we've ever been. We are really unwell as a population. We're overstressed. We are time taxed and we're constantly being stimulated, which means that our attention is always being grabbed by something all the time. Our brains just don't have the capacity to come back to homeostasis, to think about it, they can't come back to a place of a neutral set point. So we are supposed to be in a neutral place. So if you imagine this on a graph, you're in a neutral place, and then a stressor happens. And so our reaction peaks, kind of like a volcano or a mountain goes up, and it's supposed to peak, and then we're supposed to come right back down. And then on the downward end, we're supposed to come back down to homeostasis, to this neutral set point of calmness. Now, I don't know about you, but when's the last time you can remember that you were at that neutral set point? When was the last time? If you can remember, brownie points for you. Because if you're like most people, cannot even remember the last time you were at a neutral set point. Maybe it was the last vacation you had, maybe on a beach in Mexico, or maybe in the holiday season. I don't really know. But most people cannot remember the last time they were at that homeostasis set point, the place of feeling neutral, feeling calm, and feeling good. We are constantly living in a state of stress. Now, I've talked about this in other podcast episodes around the impact of stress. Now, if you want to dive into that piece of it, you can go back to episode 28, which I talk about everyday stressors and how to change some habits around that to decrease your everyday stress. But if I were to ask you to rate your stress on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most stressed and 1 being the least, where would you put yourself on an average day? Is it a 7? Is it an 8? Is it a 9? Is it a 10? Is it a 5? Where is that number? I would suspect that you're like everybody, like most people, and we're kind of always above 5. Whether you're dealing with work stuff or family stuff or kid stuff, parenting, co-parenting, divorce, separation, grief, loss, all these things have a huge impact on us. And on top of that, we're dealing with world issues. We're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with wars. We're dealing with um, interest rates and cost of living and financial stressors. There's all these things that come into play. And so we're just not getting a break from it. So, this is why self care is actually really, really vital. But what I want to share with you is I want you to understand how your brain actually works. And in understanding this, I think that it's going to change your perspective on what you've been doing for self care and shifting to something a little bit different. Okay. So bear with me. I'm going to go into teacher mode here. The brain is a magical, magical place. There's so much about it that is amazing. And we are constantly still discovering new things, figuring out how something works. So, based on what we know so far, is that there's 3 endorphins that are really important when it comes to stress, stress management, self care, and how you feel about yourself. Okay. So, the 3 heavy hitters. First one is dopamine. Okay. Dopamine is the reward center. So I want you to imagine that dopamine is this insatiable beast that always wants to be fed. It loves to be fed. It's that feel good excitement that it like kind of just can't get enough of something. When it's this feeling of, gambling is a really reward center, playing the lottery, having those really exciting feelings, jumping out of a plane, doing something really extreme. That dopamine hit is that reward center. We often get this with a piece of chocolate cake. So it is this amazing reward center. And dopamine's really important because dopamine gives us that feeling of excitement and that kind of joy that is explosive in a way, that kind of happiness that's really explosive. And it's meant to be very extreme all the time. That's what dopamine is for. And we're supposed to get them in short bursts, not all the time, but just kind of randomly. Okay. The second, endorphin that's around is cortisol. Now, cortisol is a stress hormone. And cortisol plays a very big role in our overall functioning. I mean, cortisol is related to heart health and brain health and physical health and hormone health. And it's a big player when it comes to women in perimenopause and menopause. It plays a really big role in anxiety and depression. Now, cortisol is a multifaceted hormone. It's very complex in the way that it shows up in our life. But when we're talking about stress and trying to simplify it, is that cortisol is a hormone that is related to stressful events. So if we are living in a state of stress that's a little bit too long, our levels of cortisol will go up. And cortisol interferes with serotonin, which is the third big player. Serotonin is the feel good endorphin. It's the peaceful, lay back and chill, that kind of like love feeling, that not the falling in love feeling, not that kind of heightened feeling, but that that wearing those pair of slippers that you've had for a really long time and it feels so comfortable. That's what serotonin is. It's that warm cup of tea. It's this lovely, calming, safe feeling. That's serotonin. And we want a lot more serotonin. The thing is that when stress increases, so when our cortisol goes up, cortisol interferes with serotonin. Okay, so the way you can think about it is that there's a lot of locks and there's special keys. So there's a serotonin lock that goes with the serotonin key. And when the lock and the key come together, the key goes in and turns a lock. Serotonin, it's compatible. It connects, it feels good, and it's a continuous production. We have all these locks, and our body creates the keys. Okay, so we have endless amount, let's say, of serotonin locks, and our body's constantly producing serotonin, right? To just put the key in the lock, and that feels good. Put the key in the lock, and that feels good. Now, cortisol acts as a barrier between the lock and the key. So, because if you really think about it, if you were facing a saber-toothed tiger and you have a stress response, which means cortisol goes through the roof, serotonin is really not that important because your focus is on survival. So you're looking to fight, maybe a saber-toothed tiger, maybe you're looking to run away as fast as you possibly can, play dead. I don't know. We have all these stress responses. So in those moments, we actually really want large like cortisol in our system because we are preparing for survival. We do not need to feel good. We do not need to feel excited. We don't need to feel loved and warm and cozy. We want to feel really uncomfortable because in discomfort, we're moving towards survival because we're responding to a threat. So cortisol blocks serotonin. Okay. That's really important to understand. So dopamine kind of hangs out there, and cortisol has the most dramatic impact on serotonin. Okay. The interesting thing about dopamine, again, dopamine is a really complex endorphin and hormone in our bodies, and it plays a really big role. But when dopamine's constantly being fed, there's lots of dopamine hits over and over and over and over and over again. And cortisol has an interesting relationship in that because it doesn't quite block the dopamine, but it doesn't really help it in that it makes it a little harder to feel that high. It makes it really hard to feel that joy and that over the top emotion. So what happens is that we constantly look for more dopamine hits. So I want you to imagine something that used to bring you tons of joy. Okay, let's use this example of gambling. So the first time you ever gamble, the first time you go into casinos, really exciting. And you go in with your $20 and you play your $20 and you're hitting the penny slots, let's say, or maybe now they're dollar slots. I'm not sure. I don't gamble very often. And you get your first win. Okay. So your $5 from your $20 turns into $200. That feeling of pure excitement and that reward is amazing, right? There's nothing like it. It's supposed to be that way. But then what do? We continue playing and we continue playing. And what we're doing is we're continuously looking for that next hit. And we're expecting the next win to feel just as good as the first win. And then it's a little disappointing because it isn't. So we keep at it and we keep at it. As we're keeping at it, looking for the next dopamine hit or trying to replicate that dopamine hit, it actually becomes a little bit more stressful because we really, really want this thing. And so, as our expectation of reward doesn't happen, our stress levels go up. So, cortisol goes up in our search for dopamine. And when cortisol goes up, I just told you, serotonin gets blocked. So, that feel good feeling is not there anymore. And what we're looking for is this exciting hit. So, you can see how these three really work together, sometimes against you. But self care is meant to help it use these in a way that works for you because a lot of our self care activities are focused on dopamine hits. I see this all the time where it's exciting things, it's out of the norm things, it's really drastic things where that it used to give you a really good feeling. And we equated that with self care. So, shopping or having that glass of wine or exercising, all these things, not bad in and of themselves, but we initially had a reward from them. We initially felt good about it, but we didn't really understand that's actually a dopamine hit. And so you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same result. And as you probably are thinking now, you're realizing that what used to work for self care, what used to make you feel good, is now not as rewarding. It's just not as fun anymore. It's not as exciting. So maybe you just go through the motions of it because you're just like, oh, that's what I do for self care. So therefore I'm doing it. And we just lose that connection to it because really it was an action that was connected to dopamine, so the reward center, and not an activity that was connected to serotonin, which is a more calm, warm cup of tea feeling. And why is that? It's because serotonin is not really exciting. Like, it's really exciting to be in dopamine. It's really feels really great for that reward center to just be lit up. We love to light up that reward center. So, sugar does this, alcohol does this, illicit drugs do this, shopping does this, sex can do this. There's all these things that can light up our reward center, and it feels really good in the moment. And we want more of it, and we try to make it about self care. But again, what we want to do is be more focused on reducing dopamine and cortisol. So we want to bring down the reward center and the stress hormone, and we want to increase serotonin, that calm, lovely feeling. We want to move away from dopamine hits. Now, dopamine hits, you will know what you're doing for dopamine hits if you have a habit of doing something that no longer gives you the reward that you thought or you originally got, and you continue to do it. So, one thing that people do is scroll on their phones. Our phones are designed to hit dopamine. They're not designed to give you serotonin. Because why? Serotonin is not addictive. That's just the truth. Dopamine is really addictive. The reward center is has our drive for reward is significantly, it's just hard to even quantify how much humans love reward. So we are really motivated by two things. We're motivated towards pleasure and avoidance of pain. So the reward of pleasure is a dopamine hit. So you on your phone is a dopamine hit. You're looking for that dopamine hit. And this is why apps are created the way that they are. This is why phones are created the way that they are. They hire the smartest people on the planet to create a device that keeps you on it. How do they keep you on it? Because they hack the dopamine reward center. So that is one example. There's lots of things that you're probably doing in your life that feed the dopamine, that you're looking for the hit, you're looking for that excitement again, but it's not happening. And so your stress hormone goes up, cortisol goes up, which then blocks serotonin. And then you keep on doing it more and more and more, expecting to feel better. So there's a few things I want you to do. So I want you to think about we're moving towards more calming and soothing things that brings down cortisol, brings down the stress hormone, and we're increasing serotonin. Okay. The first thing I want you to do is to identify calming and kind of just happy things in your life. Not exciting, not over the top, just that anything that brings you that great, again, like that warm cup of tea feeling, that nice cup of coffee feeling, that anything in your life that is like calm and soothing, but lovely. That's what serotonin is. It's a lovely feeling. It's not over the top, it's not low. It's just kind of in that mid range, settled, grounded, peaceful, calm. That's what serotonin is. So I want you to identify what's already happening in your life, activities that you do, people that you spend time with that leave you with that feeling of this calmness. And I want you to amplify it. I want you to focus on allocating time to those things, which means you're going to have to take away some time from the dopamine hits that you've been accustomed to. So anything in your routine, which leads me to the second thing I want you to do is I want you to identify all the dopamine hit activities that you do in your life. No shaming, no shooting all over yourself. No, I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. No shame, no embarrassment. I want you to identify them. So we're doing this with an open mind, curiosity, and openness to self with no judgment. And I want you to identify, and then I want you to limit them. So I don't want you to get rid of them. I want you to limit them. So if you identify that your phone usage is a dopamine hit and you look at your phone and it tells you, gives you a report of how long you've been on your phone and what you're using, and let's say the way that you're on your phone, there's one specific app and you're spending 3 hours a day on this app or 2 hours a day or 5 hours, whatever it is, or even your overall phone usage time. You take that number and I want you to decrease it. I want you to limit it. And then over time, I want you to decrease it again. I want you to create a slow limiting of the dopamine hits that you've got in your life. It's the same thing for sugar. So if your dopamine hit is sugar in your life, and listen, we all got issues around sugar. I want you to look at all the things that you've got. So when you pop drinking, putting sugar in your coffee or your tea or whatever you're doing, I want you to begin to limit it. I want you to bring it down and decrease it over time. I do not want you to get rid of it completely. This is a slow progress. The third thing I want you to focus on is I want you to decrease stress in your life. So we're not managing stress, we're working actively with intention to decrease stress. Now, if you want more information on that, on how you can, uncover the hidden stresses in your everyday life, go back to episode 28, where I share some ways to identify the small stressors in your life and bring that dial down. So if you imagine stress is on a dial, from 0 to 10, 10 being the highest. Let's say if you put yourself at an 8, I want you to focus on really trying to bring that down to like a 7.9 or a 7.8, or just we want to look at small compounding change over time instead of trying to do something super drastic. Now, if you're up for something drastic, go for it. I'm here all high fiving you. But long term change, the research shows that the people who are most effective on creating change in their life is making 1% change over time, compounding over time. So dial that back just a little bit. The fourth thing that you can do, and if you've been listening to me for a while, you know what's coming, is I want you to journal. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. You don't really want to do it. You don't want to make time for it. You don't know what to write. I've heard all the excuses. Trust me, I've heard it all. And I'm still going to tell you to do it. So, because journaling can be life changing and simply of gaining an understanding of yourself and being able to keep yourself accountable. Now, I do have a 30-day journaling challenge. I will leave the link in the show notes for you. And you can just click the link and join the challenge where I will send you journaling prompts. You don't even have to think about it. I'm just going to send you the prompts. All you have to do is write the response that you have down, and that's it. Pretty easy peasy, very simple to help you along the way. So, this is what self care is. Self care is decreasing cortisol, our stress hormone, limiting our dopamine hit behaviors, and dopamine being the reward center, and making space to increase serotonin in our life. So, all the feel good stuff, not the exciting things, but the calm, soothing things in our life, and making more time and allocating specific time in our day and our week for it. It's not super sexy. Like, dopamine is really sexy, serotonin is not. Like, the world is filled with activities and messaging everywhere you look about dopamine and how to get more of it, whether it's hustle culture or doing these big things or jumping out of planes or hella skiing, all these things. There's nothing wrong with them. They're great things. But it's really imbalanced because there isn't a lot of promotion for serotonin. So serotonin needs some better PR, let me tell you, because dopamine has got a really good PR team. We need to be focusing on serotonin. I want you to reflect on this and I want you to implement things in your life. And I want you to tell me about it. hit a reply, make a comment, tell me what you're doing to focus on serotonin in your life instead of allowing too much space for dopamine. This is what self care is all about. Going right back to the beginning. It is intentional and it's purposeful, and its intent is actually to address the long term effects of stress in your life. We're trying to come back to that neutral place. We are inundated with so much information and so much stimulation that we actually can't get there, and we're suffering because of it. I want you to create space for this. I do not want you to suffer in a stressful response over long periods of time. The health outcomes are out of this world when it comes to stress. We cannot keep, like, we've been done so much research on it, and we continue to do so much research to prove that stress is actually really problematic. It's detrimental. So self care is detrimental in a way to ensure that you have longevity in your life. So you're around and you're doing well. I hope you found today's episode helpful and maybe a little bit insightful. I'd love to hear your comments and your reflections and what you've learned. Hit me up on a comment on the podcast platform that you listen to. You can always go to social and let me know. Shoot me an email. I would love to know what you think about this. If you really enjoy this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and follow the show. It really just helps with growth and our potential to be exposed to more people. Thanks again for being part of the Mental Makeover community. Until next time, be bold, be brave, be well.